Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So, in today's message, we're going to be talking about the importance of isolation in your healing, specifically through the lens of it being like a cocoon that serves a greater purpose. And we're also going to be talking about the importance of a name, the importance of a title. And in the deeper meaning to that as well. Okay, so I hope you're doing well. I hope you enjoy the message today. It's one that just sort of came to me in a way that it felt like it was flowing, and I've got several pages of notes, and I just hope that it blesses you in some way. I hope that it gets the wheels turning for you and is beneficial. So a name, be it a term, a label that stands for a concept or a person's name, or a title, all of that can be very powerful, and I feel like it's oftentimes more powerful than what we realize, than what we give it credit for. And we're going to talk about that today, specifically with regards to our healing, right, and just our personal growth in general. So when you are coming out of a bad situation, there's a period where it's necessary to be in isolation for healing. Okay, I like to think of it like a cocoon, so it's not like you're just simply going to your own space and getting quiet and not talking to people and that's it. You know what I mean? That's a part of it, but I definitely believe there's a higher purpose, just like using the term cocoon, right? Like there's something going on in there, right? There's a metamorphosis that's transpiring. So I think it's important for us to embrace patience and understand that when we are pulled out of regular engagement with the world, because of finding ourselves in some kind of toxic situation, I think it's important to embrace patience and understand that we're going to be there a while. We're going to be in this cocoon for a while, and it's totally natural to want to rush that. And I think that instead of judging ourselves for that, even like if we tried to just jump back in to the world and engagement with the world too quickly, a lot of times that backfires. And so it's like you realize that you can't rush the process. You know what I mean? So we just need to accept that we're going to be there for quite a while, okay, for some time. And so returning to just your old way of life, you might say, or you may call it, is not going to be an immediate thing whatsoever, okay? And I feel like that, when we are ready to start re-engaging again with the world, it's going to happen in a very minimal and intentional manner, where it's almost like stages or levels based on where we are with our readiness. And so it doesn't have to be an all-at-once thing. And I think that understanding that is going to prevent us from putting pressure on ourselves, which is very important too. And so how applying terms and names and titles to all of this ties in is because it just brings us another level of understanding. Okay? And so calling things what they are, and understanding what to call things, and also ourselves, how to view ourselves at the different stages. This is all very powerful. It's very important. And so it's, when you're in the cocoon, you may call it the cave, the wilderness, whatever you want to call it, that's where what they call reparenting, that's where that happens. And this is where we have a choice. We have a choice to approach our reparenting as a demanding, impatient, critical parent, right? That kind of style that we're handling ourselves with here. Or we can reparent in a way where we are attuned to, the inner child's needs, okay? And that's where patience is critical, okay? And this may be very different than your experience growing up. And so it's almost like it's part of your healing. You're learning, whether you're a parent in real life or not. It's like when you're healing, you're reparenting yourself. If you didn't have that role model growing up, you're learning how to do that as you heal. So that just requires even more patience. so like I said, it's going to take a while. It's not something that we can rush by any means. All right, so let's get into talking about labels and names and terms. So calling what something really is accurately is powerful, and it can be very, very helpful in this way, okay? It simplifies things, and sometimes simple is better, right, to mentally digest and truly understand. So let's just and I encourage you to do this. If you have a practice of journaling, this may be something you want to do, because sometimes all this can just become overwhelming as we're learning, okay, about healthy versus unhealthy behaviors, toxicity, narcissism, psychological abuse. When we're learning, we're just taking in so much information and we're trying to absorb it all. Sometimes it's like it can scramble our brain, and we need to just step back and increase our patience and just get down to the basics. And this is something you can do just very simply in your journaling practice by just writing down terms, just terms, okay? Not even in a sentence or a paragraph form, just words such as narcissist, victim, psychological abuse, okay, lack of guidance, support, exploitation, selfish motives. I just encourage you to simplify, right? And sometimes it starts externally in your life, by getting rid of things you don't really need, you don't really use. There's just something to be said about being intentional with and identifying particular items or words that are powerful in and of themselves, right? And just discarding all the rest, just simplifying. It's almost like cleaning your house, like spring cleaning, right? But in your mind. So especially if you've been through psychological abuse, it can be very helpful to journal in this way, okay? So let's talk about the term transition. So transition is important because it means a going across or over or crossing over. And if you recall, a lot of my videos discuss the hero's journey and how that can be identified in various fairy tales and folklore and stories, parables, all this stuff, where it's symbolized by the main character crossing over something challenging like a river or a mountain. And so there's something else going on, right? It's always a metaphor. There's something more, something bigger going on. So the term transition in itself just holds a lot of power. And I just encourage you to sit with that for a little while, and just see if something comes to the surface, so to speak, about your life and your experience and your own transition, okay? So then we have the term transformation. Or you may say metamorphosis, right? So transformation can mean action or process of changing in form. So when we're sitting in this cocoon, I call it a cocoon on purpose because when you use the term cave, like I used recently, which is also a common thing you're going to find in stories and myth, right? It's like a place of isolation. When you for me at least, when I just switch that out for the term cocoon, it just means more. Again, there's more power in that term for me because it's more readily or quickly associated with metamorphosis. So that's important for us to understand, that there's not just nothing going on when we're sitting in isolation, when we're healing after coming out of just chaos. There's something going on right within us, and you know, transformation takes time. And so when I was reading this definition here, action or process of changing in form, the term changing stood out to me, and it reminded me of this movie I saw back when I was a kid called The Changeling, and it was a horror movie. It's a scary movie, but it's done in a tasteful way. It's not like a lot of the ones nowadays where there's a lot of blood and gore and just, you know, just scare tactics and stuff. This was more of like a genuine ghost story. And so if you enjoy that kind of stuff, I recommend looking into that movie. But essentially, it was about this man that moved into this house, and he kept hearing things, right? There were, it sounded like something going on, like a child that was very distraught. What happened was there had been a tragedy that took place in that house, and specifically with a child, and I won't go into the details, but essentially the spirit of the child couldn't rest until it felt justice was served. It's like it was just screaming and just trying so hard, striving to be heard. And you know, I think that often it's the same with us. It's like we just want everything to be made right somehow. And it's not that we wish justice in the form of, like, you know, is the word retribution? Is that right? Like, we're not wishing harm or anything bad on anyone, but it's like the truth of what happened is almost intolerable or unbearable at times to truly accept in our mind. It's almost like it's dancing at the on the line of wanting to break the mind, because it's so outside of your reality. And you know, our reality as people who are honest and who try to live with integrity and learn and grow, it's like we have this paradigm, and it's natural to assume that everyone else is operating the same as us. And when we come face to face with the fact that that's not the case, and that in fact some people are operating totally on an opposite paradigm with bad intentions, it can really do a number on your brain. And so it's about understanding this without it affecting you in a really bad way. And so it's not so much about justice, it's just about acceptance. It comes down to acceptance, especially if it's someone that, you know, for a very long time in your life has meant a lot, you know, like a parent figure. And so, yes, sometimes these things are just almost intolerable. So, which brings me to another point. When I was teaching elementary school, some children, I learned, when they are adopted, when they initially, in the first very impactful, very formative years of their life, if they were exposed to severe abuse or witnessed bad things or whatever it was, sometimes these children will get new names as part of being adopted. Not just their last name, but like their first name. Almost like it's a tactic, I think, that she used to help the child let go of the abusive past and step into a new reality and give them hope. It gives them hope and just helps as part of their healing process. There's this new name that's implemented during that process, and I thought that's really interesting, because, you know, in the Bible, God gave a few of his disciples new names too. So there's something to this. Again, there's power in words, and there's power specifically in labels and terms and titles and names. Okay, so I was just kind of skimming online a little bit, and the consensus seems to be that Jesus, when he did this, when he gave some of his disciples, the apostles, a new name, his intention seemed to be for them to have a new purpose, right? A destiny. And specifically, when someone is designated in this way, it's meant to signify that they have an important role in establishing God's kingdom, right? It's like an assignment, a divine assignment. And a lot of times you hear there's content creators out there that will call people chosen or called for having gone through, being subjected to horrible treatment, okay, and coming out of it. So I want to take a look at Ephesians chapter 4, specifically verses 1 through 16. We're going to read through that. And what's interesting is this chapter is called, at least in my Bible here, chapter 4, Unity and Maturity in the Body of Christ. And you know, we make up the body of Christ, right? So let's read it. As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each one of us grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascended mean except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. This is heavy. You know what I mean? I feel like this is heavy stuff. It's important. Then we will no longer be infants. Get this. He says, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Okay, he says we will no longer be subjected to that, right? Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is, Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So here we find a lot of answers to our discussion today. Okay, so and then if you read further in that chapter, it gets into talking about the old self and the new self, which is also very relevant. So I just recommend, if you have interest, to take a deep dive into that chapter there, Ephesians chapter 4. So the version I was reading to you is the New International Version. I want to read to you specifically verse 8 from the King James Version. It says, "Wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive." Okay, so to compare, the other version, New International, says, but to each one of us grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. All right, it says he took many captives. Okay, so he's describing the ones who he has taken as captives. They're already captives, okay, being tossed, right, around by the waves, with relation to deceitful people who are deceitful and they're scheming and all this, okay? So he's taking those captives. But I found it interesting in the King James Version, it says, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. He led captivity captive. All right, so remember that Ephesians chapter 4 that we just read opens with Paul describing himself as a prisoner of the Lord. So, something to think about. So, what was Jesus doing when he took these captives captive? He was giving them instruction. Okay? That's what was going down. I want you to think about what makes a good student. I mean, through the eyes of a teacher, right? A standard classroom kind of teacher. What are the qualities of a good student? Well, I would say just on the base level, it's a student who sits still and pays attention. Okay, right? So think about that. And then I looked into the online etymology dictionary. I looked up the term captive. A captive is someone who cannot leave and must stay and listen. What we come to understand is our cocoon truly is our spiritual classroom. And I just imagine God pulling us out of this chaos, right, to our place of isolation, sitting us down and looking at us and saying, and what did we learn? So, we have to understand, we're not going to get the cap and gown until the teacher signs off on the courses. So notice that he called them captives to start with, right? So what we don't understand is we were living our life unconsciously as captives. We were captives unaware, slaves to the unconscious mind. Okay, in varying degrees, of course. But remember, it's a consensus in the field of psychology that we all have these different layers of our psyche, including the part that's called the unconscious. So I want to compare a lesson that you might learn sitting safe and comfortable in a classroom, okay, about some battle in history versus being in the battle. You see what I'm saying? There's a big difference here, okay? This is the difference in being led by and taught by the flesh in the battle or by the spirit in the classroom. There's a difference. It's almost like God saying, have you had enough yet? So consider the whole name change thing relatable to a title. And I had to look this up. I was like, what's it called when people sign their name and then at the end they put like PhD or MD or whatever, right? They're called post-nominal letters, right? Which is what gives a person a title. So people who have earned the right to use post-nominal letters or titles understand what it means to respect that role or the rank or that title. Because here's the thing, some people are never called out of the physical battle. Okay, and you were. Why? Why the difference? Why is this? If you think about it, you wanted it. You wanted out of the battle, right? I know I did. Here's the thing, pain, we come to understand that pain serves a purpose because it makes us plead for change. Mark chapter 11 verse 23 says, for verily I say unto you that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. The cocoon is a time of transformation. It's not just healing. It's not just isolation or quiet time. Let's call it what it is. Okay, you're experiencing transformation. That's a big deal. That's powerful. And you can compare that to someone who's living a life of deceit who's living behind a mask, a narcissistic person who's just fake. Their transformation isn't genuine. Theirs is like, you can tell, because it's like they changed masks like they changed clothes, okay? Yours is authentic. And because it is, it takes time. So I just encourage you to be gentle with yourself, and go slow, and understand that you are being set aside and prepared for a greater purpose. So what's in a name? I looked up the etymology of that word too. So it means reputation. It means on behalf of, by authority of. So 1 Peter chapter 2 says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. So the people who stay in the battle stay because they're depending on themselves to make it through. You see what I'm saying? It ends with them. That's it. There's no more depth. There's no more association. There's no more cooperation with and joining into the body of Christ. You understand what I'm saying? There's no greater, higher purpose. It's just they're in the battle, and they're staying in the battle because they're depending on themselves, and that's it. Okay? So in other words, their loyalty to themselves, if you think about it, creates a dependency on their own limitations. People who escape the battle, chaos, toxicity, a bad situation in life, abuse, whatever it is, people who escape the battle go to the classroom. They're removed from the physical, the flesh part of engagement with the battle into the classroom, or the cave. You might consider it the cave or the wilderness or the cocoon. They're moved there because they asked for help. And this requires humility. You're calling in the assistance of something greater than yourself, consciously, okay? So in asking, you received. In humbling yourself, you were lifted up. Think of it like being promoted, but through God's grace. So now, your identity, represented by your name, truly is on behalf of something greater than yourself. You see what I'm saying? So it's no longer you handling everything by yourself with your limitations, struggling. It's not like that anymore. You have joined a force greater than yourself. You are a part of it. You didn't lose yourself, sort of, kind of, but not totally. It's just that you became more. You became expanded. And you can look at this through so many different lenses, you know, like moving more of your awareness from the unconscious to the conscious, re-scripting your reality to benefit yourself and others for the greater good, rerouting your neural pathways, being reborn. There's so many different lenses you can use, and it's going to mean something different to each one of us depending on our spiritual beliefs, where we are on our journey and things like that. But I just hope that this message inspires you. I hope that it got the wheels turning for you. I hope that it's encouraging for you to know that you aren't alone. You were never alone, and there is a greater purpose. So I just hope that you hang in there and that you hang on to hope and faith, and know that life is much bigger and greater than we may have imagined at first, and you matter, and your role in it matters. So thanks so much for coming along to listen to the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.